بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
There are very clear, categorical, indisputable, authentic and reliable hadith recorded by many authors, including Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, more than once in their collections, referring to the Prophet ﷺ as being a victim of sorcery and magic. Like I said, Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim and many other authors of hadith all relate that the Prophet that al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiyallahu anha says, as well as it's not just al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiyallahu anha, other companions including Zayd ibn Arqam radiyallahu anhu also relate these ahadith. They say that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and I'll just give you a summary of the authentic ahadith at least on the topic. In the 7th year of Hijrah, after the Prophet ﷺ came back from Hudaybiyah and after the Battle of Khaybar, it may have been immediately before the Battle of Khaybar or immediately thereafter, but at least it was in the beginning of, it was in the 7th year of Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ, there was a young man a young lad from one of the Jewish tribes of Medina who would visit the Prophet ﷺ and help him in certain things. The Prophet ﷺ trusted him. This young lad was approached by the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ who wished to cast a spell on him. And they convinced this young lad to collect some items associated with the messenger. He was convinced, and since he visited the home of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, like I said, he was a man, he was a young lad, he picked up the comb of the Prophet ﷺ and some of the strands of hair that had come away from his noble head and beard when combing. And he took these away. So there was a comb of Rasulullah ﷺ as well as some of the hairs from his noble beard and head which came away when combing. And he took these, and as per instruction, he delivered them to Labid ibn al-A'sam, who was a hypocrite. He was of Jewish origin, but he had embraced Islam ostensibly, hypocritically. But he remained a hypocrite. And he was actually from the Ansar, he was from Banu Zurayq. Labid ibn al-A'sam took these strands of hair and this comb, and he cast a spell on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And having done so, he buried the teeth of this comb and the strands of hair, and he must have tied knots either in a string or on the hairs themselves. And he wrapped this whole collection in a sheath of date palm fiber. And he placed this fiber, meaning it was the enclosure of the bud of a date palm tree. But it was a kind of envelope and enclosure. He wrapped all of this in that envelope and of date palm fiber. And he placed this beneath a rock, heavy rock, in a well. Having done this, the Prophet ﷺ was completely unaware. Rasulullah ﷺ began experiencing physical pains in the body. And it became more and more intense as time went on. We also learn that apart from the physical pain, Rasulullah ﷺ also experienced fleeting thoughts, I do stress, fleeting thoughts, that he had approached his wives when in fact he hadn't. But these weren't lasting, lingering thoughts, these were fleeting thoughts. So they would come and go immediately. But the physical pain would last, and it became very severe. And he would also become ill over that period. This whole period lasted 6 months, under which he remained under the spell, during which he remained under the spell. Then al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiyallahu anha relates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to me, "O Aisha, do you know? Allah has replied to me about what I inquired of him." In the words of the hadith, "Aftani fi mastaftaytu. Aftani fi mastaftaytu." He has answered me about what I inquired of him. So, and it is that the Prophet ﷺ was asleep and in a dream. And the dream of the Prophet ﷺ is wahy and revelation. He says, two men, meaning two angels came to me whilst I was lying down. One sat by my feet and one sat by my head. And the one who sat by his head was Jibreel alayhi salam, and the other who sat by his feet was Mikail alayhi salam. And one asked the other that what is wrong with him. So the other replied, matboob, meaning he is under a spell. He is suffering from the effects of magic. So the questioner again asked, and who has cast a spell on him? And it was said, Labid ibn al-A'sam, the name and identity were given. How? So it was a whole conversation that took place between these angels over the body of the Prophet ﷺ whilst he was lying there. This was a dream that he saw. So one angel said to the other, who has cast this spell? Labid ibn al-A'sam. How did he do it? And it was explained. Where has he placed these effects of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the place and location were given. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam woke up, he told Aisha radiyallahu anha, Allah has given me an answer about what I inquired of him, and he related the whole dream. Then he summoned some of the companions radiyallahu anhum, including Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu anh, and he sent them. They went, and then the Prophet ﷺ followed them himself, and the effects were extracted from beneath a rock, and indeed they found strands of his hair and a comb, and his noble comb, all wrapped up, along with knots. Now what happened is that the Prophet ﷺ sent Ali radiallahu anh, and he gave him instructions, and then he followed him. And then the Prophet ﷺ went, and as was mentioned in the dream, one angel said to the other, what is the cure? And they said, قُلْ أَعُوذْ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذْ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. So there were 11 knots, and the Prophet ﷺ began reciting. Once the effects had been extracted from the well, there were 11 knots. So the Prophet ﷺ began reciting قُلْ أَعُوذْ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. As I said earlier, there are 5 verses in Surah al-Falaq, 6 verses in Surah al-Nas, a total of 11. Upon the completion of each verse, each knot became unraveled. Second verse, second knot, third knot, third verse, third knot, all the way till the 11th. الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ. With that, the final knot came loose and it was unraveled. Then the words of the hadith are, كَأَنَّهُ نَشِطَ مِنْ عِقَالٍ. It was as though he had been suddenly released from a cord that had bound him, and he was completely relieved. Now that's interestingly, the Prophet ﷺ, despite having suffered the effects of magic for a period of 6 months, knowing the identity of the individual, Rasulullah ﷺ took no action either against the young lad or even Labid ibn al-A'sam. No action whatsoever.